So a question we get a lot in this time of the year is, what green manures do you recommend? So what happens if you have a bed that gets emptied because you've harvested something? So in this case I'm removing courgettes, okay, like those. I've removed 2 beds worth of courgettes. And one has been planted with baby turnips and radishes, and one would stay empty. So I don't want any uncovered soil, even if it's mulched. And what I'm going to do is plant some green manures. And if you have a no-dig garden, the green manure I really recommend is field beans, and that's like a broad bean which has been bred for nitrogen fixation and for quick, fast growth, lots of biomass, and yeah, it's a very, very good field bean. It's also been bred actually for cattle forage to add protein to cattle, to not only cattle but to in general livestock diet. In our case it's good because when you cut it, whenever you don't need it anymore, and in fact that should be right after flowering in the spring or early summer, you can cut it to the ground and it will die. So it doesn't require any tilling, any digging up or stuff like that. Another green manure that I like to mix with field beans is mustard. And you can replace mustards if you have very cheap cultivated rocket seed. Rocket is a very good replacement because rocket grows, I'm going to show you, at this time of the year very well, and it gives you a crop, and then with the first frost it will either die or slow down. And yeah, this is the type of rocket I'm thinking about. It's cultivated rocket or Italian rocket, a very cheap seed, and you know, it will cover the ground, create a crop for you, and the bits that you don't want, because you're going to obviously plant a lot more perhaps than what you can harvest and eat or sell, and the ones that you don't use, you leave them there as a green manure. Very dense, very good root structure. The only thing is, if it goes to flower, you know, it will start depleting the soil. It will start taking more from the soil than what it's putting in. So here, you know, I like to do in a 75 centimeters bed 3 rows and mix at least 3 families, and we could do, you know, could do more than that, but it's not as practical. What I'm using is a zipper to do it faster. Another option is broadcasting seed and then covering with a sprinkle of compost on top, but I find doing a furrow saves me a lot of work in terms of compost addition. And then because I'm adding a third green manure here, which is black oats, I know that I will have to top this bed because black oats is a grass, and being a grass, it will mean that you need to kill it by mowing it down and then covering it. There are other options, but to be honest, you know, the most practical one is this one. Topping it will mean that then you can leave a bit of residue on the ground, and the topping will transform that into compost to some extent. And so, you know, it saves you from applying compost now, because later in the year you might find that the soil has improved so much from the green manures plus their residue that you don't need to do to add a lot next year. And so black oats, a little bit more tricky because you need to top it, field beans, and then here you can add either mustard, that will be killed by the frost, or rocket, that's also a dual purpose type of crop. Okay, so Paul has very diligently cleared this bed. There were carrots in it. I'm going to show you how it was. It was like this. So half of the bed was empty, and you know, a portion of the bed, not as much as half actually, had carrots, and he harvested the carrots, and then he's done a bit of weeding, both by hand and with an oscillating hoe. Perhaps, Paul, do you want to demonstrate how the oscillating hoe was used?
Yeah, good timing, just about to do that.
Perfect, fantastic. So the oscillating hoe, you've seen it in another video perhaps in the past, but it's always worth, for those of you who are new to the channel, it's a very good tool because it slices through the top inch of the soil, and it has 2 blades, so you can push and pull and cut through any weeds, but also kind of, it's a good way to get that top mulch nice and fluffy, ready to be sown into. Sometimes you can get stuck into a root ball, so make it sharp. Notice that this is not disturbance. Some people think, oh, you no dig, you shouldn't be disturbing the soil. We're not disturbing the soil, we're disturbing the mulch. There's no clay showing up, so we're only disturbing the compost on the top. If you start hitting the clay, it means that there isn't enough mulch, and that would be a problem because it's disturbing then the soil. So after this action, Paul removed the wood chip from the bed, and then next step will be sowing some green manures. So from carrots to green manures in, how long was that? Half an hour? So very fast, very quick. The soil is remaining undisturbed and covered with living plants. Anything you want to add, Paul?
The strings.
Oh, the strings are important, aren't they? to get a feel for what the area is that you're trying to work on. And if at this stage, if the wood chip in the pathways was a bit low, it would be a good time to top it up. So this is the raking stage where we get the bed nice and fluffy. And I was saying earlier about the mulch. So in this bed, this is 3 years old, so there is a lot of compost. We haven't added any compost at this stage because this is quite stable organic matter now. So even though with the oscillating hoe Paul was going at least an inch deep, he wasn't encountering a lot of resistance at any of the underlying soil. If in your beds you haven't got to a stage where this is the case, so they're younger or the situation is not as good yet, you want to stay a bit shallower with the oscillating hoe. You don't want to hit any of the underlying soil, and then you also want to add a little bit of compost if you're going to plant something like a cash crop after this. In our case, we're planting a green manure, so we don't really want to add any more compost, and we wouldn't need to even if we were to plant a cash crop, because the soil is really nice and fluffy. You can see this up to, you know, down to almost 2 inches. There's very crumbly soil, which is a mix of organic matter, of compost and the underlying clay. So it's fantastic stuff that's been worked by the worms, and it's mostly organic material really. We're not seeing much of the clay. The bits of clay that there are so small because they've been mixed by the worms, so that you know, they're not clumps, so the danger of disturbing them is very low. So this is the zipper opening a furrow. You know you'll be in the next video tour, Paul. And now I need to take a video of so Bernie and Paul are sowing some green manures.
Hi!
So you might be happy to see some different faces for once. And so Paul has very masterfully made some furrows with the zipper, and then sowed some field beans, and now he's closing the furrow with the zipper. Any hoe would do, but it's nice with a zipper. It's a much quicker and neater job. And Bernie is planting some oats. You can see the black oats quite thickly because we have a lot of seeds. We're not really worried about that. You could have gone slightly thinner, but it's fine. It's better, you know, to get full germination and coverage. And then in this one we had some mustard, and then they've been told to be creative and choose their own mix of green manures, and we'll see what pops up. Now we're doing 5 rows. 4 would be fine as well, even 3 would be fine, but it's nice to have a lovely coverage even though it slows everything down. So we'll have 5 rows of green manures, different species. The research says that if you have 4 families or 5 families, you get much better humification. That is the grasses, the canopods, the brassicas, the legumes, and another one that I can't remember. So the idea is we want to add as many families of green manures in the same bed as possible, so their roots are all intertwined and produce some lovely cake for our microbes and some lovely humus as a result. Hey, go for it, I'm listening. There is, or you want me to come with you and show me something?
There's a bit of fibre that's in this soil, some fibrous stems, and they haven't decomposed.
Pressure's on.
Nobody knows who you are. And over here was a completely different thing, which is a green manure. So all the beds that we had empty in you know, between September and October, we decided to fill with green manures. And this is, you know, something that will allow your soil to be fed by the exudates of the plants that grow on it, and that photosynthesize. Also, it will stop erosion, leaching of nutrients, because those roots will hold on to nutrients and microbes, and it will give a lot of food to your microbes. So it's a great practice. Obviously, it's not always possible, because if a bed empties now, there's very little I can put now that will do any significant job until, you know, March, when we'll plant something else in it. This is a mix sowed. Well, this was sown I think in November by our volunteers, Laura and David, and it's rye, winter rye, intermixed with field beans, which is a type of broad bean that will fix nitrogen, and they've done really well. You know, it's a very good way of covering the soil. Here you can see this beautiful stance of green manures, and there's two crops really here, two cover crops here. One is this beautiful winter rye, cereal rye, which forms beautiful matting roots, fibrous roots, which will add carbon to the soil, and the tops will go in the compost. And then we've got these slightly modified broad beans. They're field beans. They make huge nitrogen fixing nodules, and now that they're flowering, they can be cut and the tops go in the compost, and the roots stay in the ground. We never till things in because that would mean tilling, and we don't till. Remember, we no dig. On this side we've got the oats and rye that were cut really low, like mowed to the ground 2 to 3 weeks ago. I'll show you a video of that while I talk. And they've now come back, and some of them have gone to flower, so the next mow will be the one that kills it. And it's beautiful. We've got a lot of biomass, a lot of root mass in the ground, because as you cut things, they self-prune their roots, which is amazing. And then we're going to cut it again and kill it with very little effort. Here, well, between the leeks on the left hand side and the red cabbages, we had some black oats. You might have seen some videos where I talked about green manures, and we had black oats, and you can see the residue of the crop was put in the compost, but the stalks remained in here, and the roots as well, obviously. And the soil here is so soft. It's a marvel to put your hands in there. And so we transplanted straight into it without even broad forking. And actually I think I broad forked one and not the other, so the one on the right has been broad forked, the one on the left hasn't. I was harvesting some Chinese leaf, and I want to show you two main things. Around the roots of a plant, if there is lignin around and decaying leaves, you attract a lot of life. Now some of that life you might not want because it's slugs, but a lot of it you do want. Look at these guys living around the root. I've just pulled out a root of the Chinese leaf, and look at the number of roots that are growing into the wooden residue there. So this is an amazing symbiosis between fungi and plants, and the spiders as well there. Look at that spider. Fungi and plants at play. The fungi are decomposing the wood and making it into stable organic matter, and within that organic matter a lot of microbes live, and micro arthropods feed on them, and then slightly larger animals like these guys and the spiders and the worms feed on those. So this is a bed which was already full of carbon because there was a cover crop initially, and you can now see the full extent of that work that the green manures plus the mulch have done.